Hi and welcome to the VT Countdown Clock tutorial. In this tutorial I'll be showing you how to create the clock you saw in the leader before this video and how to create many different versions of the clock but using expressions to simplify that change. I'll be going through shape layers with the trim paths and repeater operators and how to animate these using expressions, and with text layers I'll be showing how you can position text using either expressions or text on a path, and briefly we'll be using Audition just to generate some test tones. So within After Effects, the first thing we're going to do is to create ourselves a new composition, and we'll give this a descriptive name. We'll call ours Clock 45 because the first clock we're going to create is the longest one, which will be 45 seconds. And we'll select the preset HD TV 1080 25 and set its width to be the same as the height, so we've got a completely square composition, and set the duration obviously to 45 seconds. Now let's make that fit to screen, and we'll enable the title action safe area. So going up to the toolbar on the mask shape tool, make sure that the ellipse tool is selected and then turn off the fill. You don't want a fill on this. Make sure the stroke is a solid stroke and make sure the color is white, and we'll set the width to be something like 14 pixels. So now if we double click the ellipse we'll get a circle due to the dimensions we set in our composition earlier. Let's click on the shape layer, hit enter, and give that a descriptive name. We'll call that clock. And we'll expand this ellipse because we want to shrink it down a little bit. So expand the path, grab hold of the size, and let's drag that down to somewhere like 720. So it's within the title action safe area, leaving enough room for the numbers and legend around the outside. So the other thing we want to do is at the top here, we want to get rid of this portion of the circle, and we're going to do that using the Trim Paths tool. So let's expand those properties, and the Trim Path tool allows you to set the start position of the stroke or the end position or even the offset, so you can kind of move that any way you like. So let's just reset those. Now what I want to do is set this up so that we only have to do this once depending on the length of our compositions. So what we're going to do is work out how much we want to chop off. So we'll start off with 100, take away this comp.duration, which tells us our composition's duration, multiplied by 100 to get a percentage, and divided by 60, which is 1 minute. And this takes off this portion for this length. But if we go to composition settings, we can check it for our other size comps by putting that to say 30. Click OK, and it indeed takes the 50%. So let's reset back. Now the next thing we want to do is create our 5-second graduations. So we're going to turn on the grid and zoom in, holding the middle mouse button down and zoom. And then what I want to do is to get the pen tool, and we're going to click 2 squares above the center line here, 2 squares below, and that creates our tick. Right, the reason why that's got a little piece chopped off is because our trim pass applies to the whole content. We need to move that into the ellipse. So now it's as we'd expect. So let's just fit that back to the screen. Let's call this 5-second ticks. Always give a descriptive name because we're going to get quite a few of these. And let's just turn that grid off. That's a bit noisy. And now what we want to do is add a repeater to these so that we have multiple versions of it. So this is what's really powerful about the shape layers. So this tells us how many copies we've got. We've got 3 there. We can expand that to 10. And if we go to the transform repeater, we've got a whole bunch of properties in here that we can change. So we can alter the X and Y offsets for each copy, so we can move those down, and we can also change the scale, so we can make them grow. We can also change the rotations. We can put them either way, so we've got a lot of flexibility. Just reset those back again, but we don't want them to be offset, we want them to rotate. And we want them to rotate at 30-degree intervals because there are 12 of these per 360 degrees, but they're going around the wrong way. So let's go -30, which goes anti-clockwise. So that's our number, but we've set this as a fixed 10. So if we go to here and change this back to 30, you'll see that this just hasn't changed. We're still left with these additional graduations that we don't want. So again, we're going to use an expression here on the number of copies. So if we alt click, and on here we're going to say 1 plus open brackets this comp.duration multiplied by 12 divided by 60, close the brackets. That will appear to just give us 10 here, but if we go back to the composition settings and set it to 30, you'll see that we'll get less produced because of the composition's duration. So we set that back. Okay, now we're going to duplicate this and name this one 3-second tick, because we want to have one graduation that's 3 seconds, so we don't need lots of them, so we'll take away the repeater. And we'll go to the transform 3-second tick area and offset that rotation by minus 18 degrees, which is 3 lots of 6 degrees, because each 1 second will be 6 degrees. So let's turn these off, and we will actually now go and create the 1 second tick. So turn the grid on, zoom in with the middle mouse button again, and go to our pencil and start at the bottom, click 2 below and into the center, and I think we'll just alter the width of that to say 6. Let's go back out, let's fit the screen, turn the grid off, and we'll obviously need to put a repeater back on here, but let's just rename this, call it a 1 second tick, and add the repeater. And this time you want to have 20 of these, because I want these to go up to the 20-second mark. But again, we need to turn off the X offset and increase this to, or go to the rotation, set that to minus 6. Let's turn the other two back on, and there are our graduations going around. Okay, the next part is to create the clock hand, which is made out of 2 pieces. And we'll start off by creating an ellipse again. We'll come down here and shrink that right the way down. We don't need to be anywhere near the size, so we'll take this down to something like 100, well, I'd say 132. That looks good. And let's put our grid on, Alt zoom into the middle of these two here. It's going a bit further, and we'll take our pencil. We'll click in the middle of the circle here, and we'll click just 1 square shy of there, and that's created our second hand, except for I've spotted at the bottom here, let's just turn the grid off a second, that has actually created this on a new shape layer, which wasn't our intention. So if we expand this shape layer here, we can move that object across. That's what will happen if you don't have the shape layer selected. So we'll expand the contents, grab the shape, Command X and Command V, and now we can select and delete this additional shape layer. So let's just grab this shape object, drag it to the top and hit enter and rename that to second hand. So now what we want to do is to animate this. So we're going to expand the second hand's rotation properties, Alt click, and the simple expression here is time multiplied by 6. So for every 1 second it will move 6 degrees. So let's have a look at that if we do a RAM preview. So we can see that's now moving the arm, but it's too smooth, and I want this only to move on 1 second boundaries. So we can use one of the math expressions, math.floor, which will return us the lowest value of a number to the nearest integer. So if we expand this and add that in, go to the beginning, type math.floor, open brackets, go to the end of time, close brackets, hit enter. Now we can have a look at that. Let's zoom in, Alt zoom, and zoom in a bit more, and then use Command Space just to move this up here, and we'll do another round preview. And indeed we get the motion that we were setting out to get, although I want this to be a bit more organic, perhaps to overshoot and bounce it a little bit. So I think we're going to need frame level control for this. So let's go and edit our expression, and we'll create a new variable called TTF, meaning time to frames, and make that equal to, let's grab this triangle here, go up to global, time to frames, put a semicolon on the end, and now we want an offset in degrees that will allow us to have a different start position depending on the composition's duration. So offset equals 270, because obviously we want this to be 0 for our 45-second composition, minus open bracket this comp dot duration multiplied by 360 degrees divided by 60, close brackets. And now we want to get our angle, which is equal to math.floor, open brackets, TTF, divided by 25, close brackets, multiplied by 6, which is equivalent to the expression we had earlier. So if it hits a frame boundary, I want it to overshoot. So if, open brackets, TTF modulo 25 equals 0, open brackets, then angle equals angle plus 0.5 or plus equals 0.5. So close brackets, else if we're one frame past that, so if open brackets TTF modulo 25 equals 1, meaning 1 second past the frame boundary, then we'll take half a degree off, angle minus equals 0.5. Now we just need to take into account the start positions, so angle plus offset, and that should do our expression. So if we now go and do a quick RAM preview and see how that looks. Okay, I think I just need to click the RAM preview button again to get that going. And now you can see that slight bounce, which is what we were looking for. It just looks a little bit more organic. So let's go back to full screen. So click on there, click fit, and I think we're, for the time being, finished with our shape layers. So let's just roll those up. And what we want to do now is start creating the number legends that go around the outside here. So let's create a text layer. Click anywhere and just type X for the time being, and let's set the font to say 37. Make sure that it's set to auto, and we'll set the baseline shift to -12. I've pre-worked that out because I know that when it gets around to these edges it will center it nicely. So let's expand the text layer. Alt click on source text and type in name. So what this will do is set the actual text value itself to the same as what the layer name is set to here. So if we hit enter, type 0, if I just click away from here, you'll see that that's now updated to 0. Okay, right. So the next thing we want to do is position this, and before we do that, actually let's just get the effects and presets up, and we want to create a slider so we can offset the radius. So type in slider, let's select the layer first, and in the effects and presets panel there, and double click or drag it and hit enter on the slider control and type in radius. So now we want to set the position of the text based on the name of the text layer in terms of degrees. So let's alt click on position and type in angle equals degrees to radians. JavaScript works in radians, we work in degrees. Open brackets 6 times parse int, which will get the integer from the text layer name, open brackets name, close brackets, minus 180 degrees, semicolon, hit return. And now we're going to put in radius, grab hold of our Pickwick tool, drag it up to the slider, and let go. So now we've got that value from our radius slider in here. And now y position, y pos equals radius multiplied by math.cos, open brackets our angle, close brackets, x pos equals radius multiplied by math.sine, open brackets angle, close brackets semicolon, hit return. And now we just need to put that into the array x pos plus 540 and y pos plus 540, which offsets it from the center, and semicolon, hit return. Right, okay, it's case sensitive. Let's just take that capital A output there, and there we go. So let's see that by moving the radius slider up and getting that into position. So we take that up here to say something like 414. That's it. And then the only other thing is to only display these numbers if they are less than or equal to the composition's duration. So we do that by setting a parameter on, or setting an expression on the opacity. So we alt click and we'll set the default as 0, and then if open brackets this comp dot duration is greater than or equal to the numeric value of the name, then we'll set the opacity to 100. So the longer compositions, they'll all display, the shorter, not so many of them will display. So now if we duplicate this, we've got our next number. Let's change that to 3 and duplicate it again to get 5. Enter on 5, and then we'll just run through all those, and it automatically places these dependent on the number obviously corresponding to seconds or percentage. So let's go to composition settings and set this to 30. You'll see that all those numbers disappear that aren't required, which is exactly what we wanted. Let's just reset that back. Next thing we want to do is to create our countdown here. So we'll set another text layer, type in XX, hit enter, and we'll just make this font a little bit bigger, say 180 or so, and position that where we want it. And I think we'll have that perhaps as a bold, make it stand out a little bit more. And let's just go into here. Again, we can set this as source text to have an expression, and this will basically be the upper limit of the duration minus the time. So we'll create a string, s equals empty string plus math.ceil, ceiling, open brackets, this comp.duration minus time. And if the length of this string is less than 2, we're going to pad it with a 0. So while open brackets s.length less than 2, close brackets, then the string equals 0 plus the string, and then it works. Next thing I want to do is animate the fill color dependent on the length. So if it's below 10 seconds or 10 seconds and below, I want this to be red. So if time is greater than or equal to this comp.duration minus 10, then we'll set it to red. All other times we'll have this as white, which is all 255, 255, 255, 255. So that's our, and if we just go to here, we can kind of just see that. So we go to just before the 10 seconds, you can see it now animates itself to red. So that's giving us a bit more of a kind of warning that we're running out of time. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add our fade text up here. So let's create another text layer. Click on the text tool, type in fade. And I think that's a bit too big, so we'll take that all the way down. Not that small. Let's take it out to about, I don't know, yeah, that should do for now. We'll set this to a regular weight. And now what I want to do is basically going to do text on a path. So we're going to create an ellipse, so double click on there. And you can see this is offset because it's positioned, the center of this is positioned where our text was drawn. So let's reset the position to 0, 540 by 540. And now if we go to the text property, so actually let's just make this a bit smaller. So double click on it and then shift and drag. There we go. Start with that. Go to text. Now we can actually click on the path options here, select that mask, and it'll pop the text on. So we can offset this text by dragging the first margin, but I can see that we need to switch that around. It's going to go upside down in a second. So click reverse path, and that flips the text over. And let's just drag that round. I could have gone the other way, but never mind. And position that, and instantly we can see it's a little bit big, that text. I think we're going to have to make that a little bit smaller. So let's just drop the size down a little bit. Something like that. And I actually want this to be a bit closer now, so let's just resize our mask. And we'd have to realign that text when we're done. So let's just realign that back there. So that's our first piece of text on a path. So now we can duplicate that for our ident text. Let's call that ident. And again, open up the text path options and just move that around. Oh, I seem to have lost, just type in ident. Okay. Again, this one we're going to have to flick the other way. So let's turn the reverse path off and set that between 15 and 20 seconds. That's our ident text completed. So what I want to do is just chop a little piece out of the main circle where that ident text is. So we go to our contents and to the main ellipse, and we'll add ourselves, let's just roll this down a bit, we'll add ourselves a secondary trim paths operator, and this is going to work on a percentage of what we've already got there. But let's just start off with the start. Let's alt click on there, and it works back from the end. So 100 times 5, so we've got 5 marks divided by this comp dot duration, and that's basically taken off one measure's worth. Alt click on the offset, and we'll have gaps equals this comp dot duration times 12 over 60. Spacing equals 360 divided by the gaps, and the offset is equal to the gaps minus 4 multiplied by the spacing. And that will ensure that this gap will always stay between the 15 and 20 second mark. So if we go to the composition settings and set this to 30 seconds, click OK, you can see that the ident is still where it is, because all these percentages have now changed because the start point of the original path has changed. Okay, so let's just play this and see how it all looks. Now, what I think might be nice is if this part here fills up with colour as the hand moves around, so we can see the kind of progress quite visually. So let's go back down and duplicate this ellipse, drag it to the top, and we'll call this green stroke. And then we'll expand this and go to the stroke colour and click on the colour and change that for green. Click OK. Now I don't want to have this gap, so I'm going to go down to the secondary trim path and delete it, and then go to the end here and start building our expressions. So start equals the start, and the increments are going to be the difference between 100 minus the start divided by this comp duration, so it'll scale for all the different sized clocks we got. Now if time is less than the comp duration minus 10, then start is math floor time multiplied by the increment, else start plus this comp duration minus 10 times increment. So that'll basically stop it at the 10-second mark. So if we have a look there, something's wrong here. Let's have a look. That should be a plus, not an equals. There we go. So that's basically then stops the green at the 10-second mark. That's what the if statement's there to do. So the next thing is if we duplicate this, and we're going to create a red stroke now. So hit enter and type in red stroke. And we'll expand this down, change the colour from green to red. And we'll open up the trim pass, change the start to read 100 minus 10 times 100 over 60. So I've just expanded that out just to make it obvious. Minus 0.2. So I just want a little bit of a red as soon as it hits the 10. So let's get down to the end, open up this expression, and change this to read start equals pick whip the start, the red stroke, increment equals 100 minus the start minus the 0.2, removing the offset, divided by 10. Then if the time is greater than or equal to this comp dot duration minus 10, then start plus 10 minus math dot ceil, ceil, 9 minus open brackets this comp dot duration minus time times increment plus the offset 0.2, else start, oops, need to have a little bracket there. So this expression just ensures that the red bar only gets displayed when the time's less than 10 seconds. Okay, so let's now make our 30-second clock by duplicating the 45-second clock, and the only thing we're going to need to do on this is to change the length. So if we go to composition settings and change the duration to 30, we've now got our 30-second clock. We can test this works just by clicking on a couple of places and observing that all the elements appear to be working as intended. And again, the 20-second clock will just duplicate again and call this clock 20, and go into the composition settings and simply change the duration, and that's 20 seconds. So let's create our leader composition now. So let's go to composition, new composition, select the full HD preset, and leaving the width and height at the default values, and let's just set the duration to 45 seconds. We'll create our longest leader to start with. And now we can just drag in our clock 45 and move it around. In fact, let's scale it first. Let's go to 80%, which is within our title safe area, and we just need to reposition that over to the left hand area, which will be 540. Let's just drag that across so it just touches the title safe. Let's turn off the title safe margins because we're going to create our own using shape layers. So select the rectangle tool and then double click. Let's set the width to say 2 pixels and just drag that into being 1920 multiplied by 0.9, which will give us our our action safe area. Let's just change that border down a little bit to 1 pixel, that's it. And now we can duplicate this rectangle and go open it up and change its size to 1920 multiplied by 0.8, and that will give us our title safe area. So let's call this safe margins. Next thing I want to do is to create our test tones. So let's just set the cursor at 25 seconds, go into Audition. So let's bring up Adobe Audition, go to File, New Audio File, call it test tone minus 12 dB because we want this to be at minus 12 dB. Make sure it's 48 kHz stereo, click OK, and then go to Effects, Generate Tones. And ensure that it's not got sweep frequencies enabled, and you've got it at 1 kHz, that's enabled, and have it at minus 12 dB. The only other thing to do is to set the duration to 5 seconds, so 5.0, and click OK, and that will generate us our test tone at minus 12 dB. Let's just hear that a second. Lovely. Okay, so now we're going to export that to our file system. So File, Export, File, call it test tone minus 12 dB, click OK. And then flick back into After Effects, and we're going to import this back into our project. So File, Import File, select test tone 12 dB, and open. Now we could just drag this and put it straight in here, but I think it'd be better if we create a composition with our test tones in that we can reuse. So composition, new composition. Let's call it pips. It doesn't matter about the size, but the length is going to be 20 seconds. So let's drag this in. That's 5 seconds tone at 20 seconds. Duplicate it. And for this, we're going to set the start point at 10 seconds, 10.0. And we want to drag the duration right down to just 2 frames. There we go. Let's duplicate it again. Set this to be at 15 seconds. And then duplicate, and 16 seconds, duplicate, and 17 seconds. So that's it. That's our test tones all in one composition. Let's close that. So coming back into here, let's just set our cursor back to 25.0, and we can just drag this composition straight in and align it with the 25-second mark, which corresponds to 20 seconds left on the comp. So let's create a new composition now for the slate. Let's call that slate, and make sure that's 1080 by 1080 and 45 seconds. Again, we'll reuse this for the other clocks. Let's turn on title safe, and note that in this we can have our text going right up to the left hand portion of the screen here, but we want it to only come up to the title safe on the right hand side. So let's start drawing our text. So click on the text tool, okay, and type in title, VT countdown clock, duration 33 minutes, 32 seconds, date 20th of the 5th 2013, and you call it YouTube master. You can put anything you like in these fields. It's really the information that's relevant to you. You can put the size, HD 1080p 25 frames a second, 16:9, and 2-channel stereo at 48 kilohertz. So, and hit enter. That's our text area. Now what you can do is create a logo. So let's import a logo. File, import. Let's have a logo in there. Let's drag that onto our comp. Resize it by shift and drag. Let's just drag that to the left. That's it. And I think I'll have a web address in there. So let's create another text field and put my web address, which is http://www.opacity.tv, and just drag that over a little bit. Now select both of these, and if you go up to Window, Align, we can align these by clicking on this center tool, and let's just drag that down. So that's just another very quick way of getting things to line up nicely. Let's go back to our main comp and drag that slate in, and let's get this positioned up. So let's open it up, go to transform, go to the scale. Again, this wants to be 80%, and for the position it's going to be 1920 minus 540, and that will get it lined straight up in the middle. Now I don't like the way the text is kind of balanced at the moment, so let's go back into the slate and make sure by selecting everything, Command A, just drag that down to get it balanced. That's it. Now go back. That's better. Let's roll that up. So let's give that a proper name. So hit there, hit enter. Let's call it leader 45. And what we can do now is duplicate that, Command D, and call that leader 30. Duplicate it again, Command D, and call that one leader 20. So let's go into leader 30, double click, click on the clock 45 here, and we want to replace that with the clock 30. So click and then Alt drag, let go, and that's now put our clock 30 in there. And then we just need to move the pips over so they line up at the end, because we always want the 20 seconds from the end of the comp, and drag the end of this work area to the end of the comp, right click and trim the comp to work area, and that's now made us a 30-second composition, which we can just double check here. There we go, it's trimmed it down to 30 seconds, and likewise we can go into the 20-second leader, and again select the clock 45, select the clock 20, Alt drag, and let's replace that. And again, just drag the pips right over, which equals the length of this one, and then just grab the end, right click, trim comp to work area. So that's pretty much the end of this tutorial. Other than to say, hopefully you found this walkthrough and project useful, and that you've seen the power of expressions even on the simplest of compositions to make them very flexible. If there's enough interest, I'll put up a link to the project file, but for now, thank you for watching and goodbye.